When you log on to Google Classroom, you should see something that looks like this. To complete your one-dimensional collision assignment, what I want you to do is scroll down a little ways until you see that assignment. 1D collision lab. I want to click on this. This is the screen that you should see when you click on 1D collision lab. There's a whole bunch of instructions here, some of which you're not even going to bother opening, some of which you don't even really need, to be honest. The first thing, for instance, the AirLink instructions. If you completed this lab yesterday, you've already used the AirLink and you don't need to do that again. The presentation that I had up on the board yesterday, some sample data if you happen to not finish your lab. Okay, make sure that if you do use the sample data, make sure that you use just the sample data. Don't mix and match your data with the sample data. So it's either yours or the sample data. Then we got some instructions, some summary instructions for graphing and adding tread lines to your graph. And then for those of you who might forget how to submit an assignment on Google Classroom, which I can't imagine that would be any of you guys, there's some instructions for that. A YouTube a podcast for us from last semester for the same lab, which is because you were a refresher on what you need to do for this. And then, of course, a little podcast that shows us how to do the graphing. Basically, what I'm going to show you here today. Now, if you scroll down just a little bit further, there's a little section for your work. Now, your work has one document already created for you. It's not really a template. I called it a template, but a template would be just kind of you filling in a few things. This you got to pretty much create from scratch, except for one thing. Okay, this so-called template has a rubric on it, which is going to be what I put where I put your marks. So for design, which is basically your variables, I'm going to put a marker to 3. For data, marker to 3, and so on. Please leave that there, and please leave it at the top of the page, and just complete your lab right underneath that. And then when you get it back, you can look here for a quick little summary of your marks. You'll also see comments. Okay, I'll also comment on it to give you some feedback, but a summary of your marks would appear there. Now, I want to spend just a couple minutes going over the graphing that you're going to have to do for this lab. So I'm going to go back here now to my 1D collision lab. I don't even have a spreadsheet here that I can do my graph on, so I'm going to create one. I'm going to go down here beside Create, click on Sheets. I want to create a sheet. And now under your work, you're going to see a document and a spreadsheet. Now click on the spreadsheet, and it should be blank. Now what you want to do is put in your data table. This is first column, initial velocity of car 1, and it's going to be in meters per second. And then the second column is going to be final velocity of both cars, and that's going to be in meters per second as well. Now, my data, I'm just going to make up some data here. There is some sample data posted. I'm not going to graph that right now. Okay, that's going to be up to you if you're using the sample data. My data that I'm going to put on this graph right now is going to be beautiful data. It's going to be perfect data because I'm just going to make up some nice even numbers. Yours won't be this perfect, and that's okay. Okay, the technique is going to be exactly the same. You can see that my numbers are going to be, oh, look at that. My initial velocities are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That worked out handy. My final velocities, they're going to go up by 3s. There's my data table, okay? So yours, again, is not going to be quite so neat as that. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Now, when you go to plot this graph, you're going to highlight your data. My suggestion for you, my strong suggestion for you, is that you do not highlight your data with the headings there. Rather, you highlight the data minus the headings. You will get the correct graph if you highlight the headings. But if you highlight the headings, it will automatically name the graph for you, and it will name it incorrectly. It will name it backwards. It'll name it initial versus final velocity, and that's not what we want. We want final minus initial. It's always y-axis versus x-axis. So if you just highlight the data rather than the headings, you're going to have to manually enter a title for the graph, and then you're more likely to get it correct if you're doing it manually. So I highlighted my data, then I'm going to click Insert, and then I'm going to click Chart. Now there's a whole bunch of options for chart. We certainly don't want a bar graph. So if we scroll down, we're going to see an option for a scatter plot. And this is what you always plotted last year in Physics 20, is a scatter plot. Now, we want to customize this, first of all, with a title, and then labeling our axes. So let's click on Customization tab. I'm going to enter my title, which is going to be Final Velocity of both cars versus initial velocity of car 1. There's my title. Now, if I scroll down a little bit, it gives me a place that I can label my axes. Firstly, my horizontal axis, I'm going to label as initial velocity of car 1, and I got to label my units as well. That's going to be meters per second. Now, let's change that axis to the vertical and make it final velocity of both cars. Notice I'm not using a symbol here. I'm writing it out in words. There we go. Now, I got to add a trend line and line a best fit to this. So I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. The very bottom gives me an option for a trend line. Right now it says none. I want to change that, put a linear trend line, because clearly this is a straight line graph. Yours won't be quite that clear, but it should still be a linear trend line or straight line graph. So click linear. Now, when I do that, it opens up some new options below that, including a label. Immediately under what you just did is the label. You want to change custom to use equation. Now you can see the equation is displayed here. It says y is equal to 3x plus 0. That means my slope is 3, which is really what you wanted to get from this graph, and my y-intercept is 0. And I told you guys your y-intercept will either be 0 or really, really close to 0. Now I'm going to go down to the bottom here, click Insert. That's going to insert the graph into my spreadsheet. I don't want it there, though. I want it in my document. So I'm going to go up here at the top right-hand corner where that you see that little down arrow. Click on it, and then select Copy Chart. Go back to my document under Analysis. Remember, data is what you collected yesterday. Analysis is what you do with that data, including your graph. So under Analysis, I would put my graph there. You can link that. Doesn't really matter. Paste it by going Control-V, or you can right-click it and click Paste, and there you go.